Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a very interesting guest for you today, Jordan Berry, coming out of Orange County, California. And he specializes in helping individuals achieve financial freedom through laundromat ownership, which is a really interesting revenue stream. And I'm really excited to have him on the podcast to talk about it. So, Jordan, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Christopher, for having me on the show. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've always been interested in these kind of income streams where it's either laundromats or, vending machines, self storage, these kind of types of businesses. So talk about how you got started, and I'm really excited to dive into these conversations.
Yeah, so I about a decade ago, I was making a career change and was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and a little bit of an identity crisis, trying to figure out what direction to go. And we're living here in Southern California. I'm married, got two kids, and they were very young at the time. And I had a genius idea that why don't we take the money we have in the bank? We could rent out our house here in Southern California and go buy a condo on the beach in Hawaii and live there. Who knows? Sell jewelry on the beach or whatever. Who cares? Like we're on the beach in Hawaii. And then when our kids are school age, if we want to move back to California, we could do that. And then net gain condo on the beach in Hawaii. I thought that was a genius idea. And my wife, on the other hand, said, yeah, we could do that. Or we could buy a laundromat.
Yeah.
So we ended up buying a laundromat. And the way that came about was she had a family friend who he worked a tech job in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he was making really good money but working 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. And he ended up buying a laundromat, replacing that tech income with one laundromat, and was working 5 to 10 hours a week. We thought that was a great idea, so that's the direction we went.
Yeah. Which is interesting is what is appealing about laundromats? Just so I've really been interested in these types of business models. It's you don't really hear about. You're usually hearing about like real estate or venture capital, startups, all this. So just really why laundromats?
Yeah, I think the big draw of laundromats is number one, they have really good returns, right? So if you're looking for a place to put some money or get in a business that is going to get you pretty good returns with minimal time input, and laundromat's a great asset class. For example, an average base hit laundromat deal, you're looking at a 20 to 25% return on your investment, and that's unleveraged, so no loan. So if you get a loan on that, return goes up from there. And it's just hard to compete with that with any other asset class, getting 20 to 25% plus on 5 hours a week of effort. It's just a tough thing to beat. So I think that's a big part of the draw. And then also for me, this was a draw for me after the fact, after I learned more about the business. But the other cool kind of side of laundromats is that you really have an opportunity to make an impact in a community. And a lot of times laundromats are in communities that are lower income and need good businesses and good services in their communities. And so you really have an opportunity to do something great while making a good return. So that's what I really love about laundromats.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know most of it's cash. And now they take credit cards, or and you can put things like video games, or they can put snack machines. You mentioned that your first experience didn't go as planned. And so what are some of the downfalls to watch for? What did you learn before? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I mentioned the goal was like my wife's family friend to make a bunch of money and not spend a lot of time. But my experience was pretty much the exact opposite. I was losing money early on and I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out why I was losing money. There's a stat that floats around that's 95% of laundromats are successful. And I was like, how am I in the 5% that can't figure this easy business out? But like I said, this was over a decade ago. There really were no resources available there at the time. Now there's lots podcast and there's a whole bunch of other people doing stuff too. So there's a lot of good information out there. But I had no business experience. I didn't know anything about real estate investing. I really didn't know a whole lot about anything. So I jumped into it and I relied almost entirely on the broker to help me. And it just turned out the broker did not have my best interest in mind. He told me things like, you don't really need to do any due diligence because this is a fixer-upper, so none of the numbers really matter anyways. So when I went into it, I thought I was going into it breaking even and was going to improve it, but really it was losing a bunch of money already. And so I was already starting off on a bad foot. And so that was a big wake-up call for me. Very expensive lesson for me to learn there. And I just bought the wrong asset. He gave me pie in the sky numbers and I didn't have anything to compare him to, so I believed him. And one of the downsides of laundromats, and like you said, more and more laundromats are accepting digital payments and stuff, but still the majority of them are cash businesses. So it can be tricky to actually know how these things are performing when you're doing like due diligence. And it can be easy to go wrong in there. But like I said, now there's a lot more resources. There's people to reach out to, stuff like that. And I think also, just to put this out there, my experience initially was not good, but I think it means something that I'm still here saying, actually, laundromats are a really good asset class. So I do also want to point that out. It's not all doomsday over here.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And usually the first kind of you're getting your experience. And again, for the audience, never trust a broker.
Never trust the one person whose income depends on you buying a deal.
Yeah. What's interesting is you talked about, so how do you go about finding these places? Cause here in Austin, they've got places, laundromats, and how do you know where, is it like real estate? Is it like location, or do you treat it like a small business? Because when you hunt for real estate deals, it's like you look at cash flow, you look at property values. How do you go about evaluating laundromat as an investment?
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna tackle the how do you find them, and then how do you approach them as an investment? Two separate questions, I think. So number one, finding them. There's websites like BizBuySell, BizBin, LoopNet that have listings for laundromats, so you can go there. But what I find there is that a lot of times those are you can find good deals there, but they're harder to find there. So the other three things that you can do to find laundromats is number one, when you go to the like BizBin or BizBuySell or LoopNet or whatever, and look at those laundromats, reach out to those brokers because the brokers are the gatekeepers of the majority of sales of laundromats. And a lot of times they sell those laundromats before they hit those websites. So your goal is to get those things sent to you before they hit the websites, if possible. So reaching out to brokers, small business brokers, laundromat specific brokers. And then the other kind of two methods that are working today in today's market is direct mail campaigns and just actually going to the laundromats and talking to owners there. So I'll
Interesting.
pause before I go to the analysis side of things, but any questions there?
No, go ahead, because I have some follow-up questions.
Yeah. So once you do find it, then the question becomes, okay, how do I know how much this thing is worth? Right. So like small businesses, like commercial real estate, the value of the business is going to be based on the net income, net operating income. So just so we're all on the same page, I'm sure your audience actually knows, but income minus expenses before loan payments, taxes, that kind of thing. So that net income. And then for a laundromat, we're actually going to apply a multiple to it. And today, the average multiple is somewhere in the like 4.5 to 5.5 times that net. You can get them higher, you can get them lower, but 4.5 to 5.5, or maybe 4 to 5.5 is the multiple. And in order to figure out where on the spectrum that multiple is, you need three numbers basically. So you need to know how old the equipment is, you need to know how much the rent is, and how many years are left on the lease. And if you know those three things, you can determine that multiple to apply to the net income to determine the value of the laundry.
Yeah, really interesting. And tangential question is when you were speaking, I was like, yeah, I could find a retail space in a shopping center or wherever, and then go in, and then is it better to start from scratch and just find the location and then equip it with all the equipment, or buy an existing laundromat? What are the pros and cons of those two approaches?
Yeah, buying versus building I get
Yeah.
that question all the time. That's a great question. And especially I think for your audience, because your audience would have the capability to do either one. So
Yeah.
great question. And there are pros and cons. So buying an existing one, the pros is that unless it's like a big fixer upper, you're probably cash flowing day one. So as soon as you buy that thing, you're cash flowing maybe you need to do some work to it or things like that. But the big benefit of buying is that everything is there. It's cash flowing. You have a customer base. You're off to the races. They probably have at least some systems in place. So you're not having to start everything and learn everything from scratch. So as much as you're buying the business, you're also buying this, whatever systems they have in place there. So that's the pros. The pros of building are, number one, you can pick that location that you want, but you got to find the right one. But location is important, just like in real estate. But you can pick the location and size of space that you need, and you can lay it out exactly how you want it. Everything's going to be brand new. So your headaches are going to be very low. The cons, though, of building are you've got to, everyone who you need to come do laundry at your brand new laundromat is currently doing laundry somewhere else, another laundromat, their apartment, their house, whatever. So you've got to build a whole new customer base. And one thing I like to say is that laundry is like it's a habitual chore, right? Like we don't want to think about laundry too much. We just know every Saturday morning or Tuesday night or whatever, I go do my laundry wherever I do it. And so when it's a habit, we don't think about it. So if you're opening a new laundromat, you've got to somehow snap people out of that habit and get them to change the habit. So that's a con. And there's lead time in the build out, and there's lead time between opening the doors and hitting profitability. So when you buy existing, maybe you're profitable day one. If you build new, it could be 6 to 18 months until you're making money.
Yeah. And then talk about the cost, because when I think about, not sure, 24/7 a business, and then people are using the machine, and you've got water costs and maybe pipes bust or the machine breaks down. How much expense do these mishaps usually? Is it like 5%, 10%, just rough part?
Yeah. Let me answer on the flip side for a second. So margin wise, you're usually looking 25 to 40% margins. That's with all your kind of expenses and maintenance and all that stuff. So to your question, utilities are usually about 15 to 20%. They can be higher or lower, kind of depending, but 15 to 20% is a good target. Utilities, rent, we like to see around 25%. In terms of like maintenance and some of those like CapEx, like pipes bursting and stuff, it really depends on the age. If you build out a brand new one, you're probably going to have very minimal, if any, repair costs for 3 years. And all that stuff's going to be under warranty and all that. But if you buy one that's got 20-year-old equipment, you could be spending $1,000, $1,500 a month on repairs there too. So it really does depend there. But really what you're shooting for is what margin are you wanting? And really 25 to 40% is what's pretty common.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. I know we have around 5, 10 minutes, but that was interesting. And then in terms of trends, because I know, for example, like I own real estate, and I'm just like trend wise, it's just, I don't see, like, I think real estate is peaked out, and just we could talk about that. But, how resistant is the laundromat industry to things like recessions or just tail events, things unexpected? Is it pretty, just given all this economic uncertainty, and just your business could be wiped out just for some random reason?
Yeah. Luckily, I guess not luckily, but we've got some fairly recent experience here to draw off of to see how we've got a couple of recessions in the last 15 years. We've got COVID, which was this anomaly that shut down the world, really. But what we see typically during laundromats, I would consider recession resistant, right? So during a recession, people are going to try to wear their clothes twice instead of once or whatever, right? But the reality of it is that everybody has to do laundry. You've got to do it. So really, during a recession, you might take a small, like a 10, 15% revenue decrease. But really, laundromats thrive. And what tends to happen, we see this in real estate even too, right? Like those luxury apartments, they take a really big hit. But like mobile homes or more economical apartments, they actually do really well during a recession because everybody kind of trickles down. And same with laundry on that bottom tier of the trickle down, where if they're outsourcing their laundry or something like that, maybe they're just going to bring it to the laundromat now. So that actually balances out a little bit. In terms of like unexpected stuff, we look at COVID. I remember driving around LA feeling like I was in The Walking Dead or something, because the streets were totally empty and there were like tumbleweeds and stuff. It was crazy. But I looked around and like that business is closed, that business is closed, that business is closed, that laundromat's open because people still needed to do laundry. And so laundromats tended to do pretty well even through COVID. We did take a couple months there where revenue went down 20-25%, but they pretty much bounced back really quickly.
Interesting. Yeah, there was a follow-up question, but it's really fascinating just the way these cash flowing businesses. Oh, the one final question is startup costs in the general area, because I know it depends. You're in California, I'm in Texas, but is it going to be startup costs? Is it going to be like 100,000, a couple 100,000? Is it going to be a couple tens of thousands ballpark just to get your foot in the door and get started?
Yeah, great question. And I would say it's less location dependent. It's a
Yeah.
little bit location dependent in terms of an urbaner area versus a rural area. Maybe it'll
Yeah.
be a little cheaper out in the boondocks, but it's less location dependent and more net income dependent. But with that said, how much money do you need? It's a little easier to back into that number. But on average, I would say, and particularly for your audience, if you're
Yeah.
not looking to invest a whole lot of time and effort and energy in it, you probably don't want a fixer. So you're probably looking at about $250,000 and above for the laundromat cost.
Yeah.
And I would anticipate financing somewhere between 25 and 40% of that, somewhere in the 50 to $150,000 range. You're good. And then obviously you can go up to multiple millions of dollars for laundromats also. So you can go crazy with it too. And then
Yeah.
you can buy multiple locations and there's lots of things you can do. But if you're in that 50 to $100,000 range, you can probably get a pretty solid cash flowing laundromat.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Really very fact you've actually spurred my interest in how can people contact you and find out more about you. Obviously you help people with start up a laundromat business, which is always have a professional helping you and somebody that's guiding you. So how can they reach out to you and work with you, et cetera?
Yeah. So I have a platform podcast called Laundromat Resource Podcast. I interview laundromat owners and other kind of industry professionals. You would think that would be a gigantic flop because it's a podcast about laundromats, but it's surprisingly popular over there. Go check that out. Laundromat Resource is the platform. We're on all the socials and YouTube and all that stuff. And we do help people in a lot of different ways. We've got a ton of free information and resources to help you get started. If you're looking for more than that, we've got consultants, and then we have a program that takes you from wherever you're at right now all the way through kind of building a laundry empire all the way through. And so we put together all the information you need. We've got one-on-one coaching with that. We've got industry relationships, all that stuff is set up. So wherever you're at, whatever you need, if you're just like hey, I just need you to point me in the right direction, we've got all that stuff for free. If you're more like, hey, I don't want to deal with the headache, just tell me everything I need to know. And we've got that too. So laundromatresource.com is the platform.
That's really cool. You help, it's like nationwide, not just in California.
Nationwide, we're in Canada, we're in Australia, and we're in a little bit in Europe even. So all over.
Very cool.
And in fact,
Awesome.
South Africa also. So
Interesting.
and South America. We've got some people in South America. We're all over the place, man. We're not in Antarctica yet. So,
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I love your vibe and your energy. And for the audience, I recommend you check out Jordan's socials and check out his resources, reach out to him. And thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. A lot of fun, and I appreciate it.